Hi, I'm Karina from Karina Sketches, and I'm here to defend the furries after my friend dared me to draw them for a whole week. I do want to say first that if you don't know what a furry is someone who likes anthropomorphic animals, basically animals with human features. If you want to know more before you start this video, I've left some videos for you to watch in the description. I'll quickly give a stage to my furry artist collaborator extraordinaire, Crayons and Circuses. All of her information is in the description as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Circus. I am the artist behind Crayons and Circuses, and my species is an original species created by myself called a Bentleporphis. We'll talk more about original species later in this segment, but I've been asked by Karina Sketches to be an ambassador for the furry fandom, and I was more than happy to oblige. Now, Karina told me that most of you guys watching would be normies, which is basically people who are not in part of the furry fandom, or fandom in general. So I'm here to act as a teacher to tell you all about the lingo within and out of the furry fandom, and try to do my best to explain everything that you should know when hopping into the furry fandom. Also, I was asked to talk about the art aspect of the fandom, which is pretty much the whole fandom. Many people, if not all, are here for the art aspect and the creativity within the furry fandom. And I don't mean to brag, but I feel pretty qualified to talk about the art aspect because I'm a pretty good artist myself, or at least I feel like I am. Alright, let's jump into it. To start, I feel like it'd be simplest to explain what is and isn't a furry through different body types and parts that make up a furry and its figure. Now, these definitions may vary depending on whether you're talking about the art or the fursuit, but on average, they're pretty much the same. There's a whole spectrum of anthropomorphism that help define the furry figure, and there are some common types, and that's what we'll be covering today. The first kind of furry you might run into is the type of furry that is more human-like and less furry. This is also known as plantigrade if you're talking the suit. What this is where a furry will have more of a furry head, hands, and feet with a tail, and probably some more attributes. Their whole body's covered in fur, but if you take away those attributes, you would pretty much have a human. The next, and probably most common furry that you will run into, is something that's more animalistic and less human. The most common way of identifying these kind of furries are typically their digigrade legs, which are legs that are more defined in the front and back to look more animalistic, like a dog's. If you were to strip back all the animal parts to this furry, I don't think you would get a human. You would get some weird animal concoction that kind of resembles a human, but not really. I myself feel like I'm a good example of this kind of furry, since I'm not necessarily human, but I'm not necessarily full bird. The last, and probably the most rarest kind of furry that you'll run into, in terms of suits, not so much drawing, is the feral kind, which is a furry that is completely animal. It doesn't have any human attributes in it. It probably walks on 4 legs, unless if there's a creature that walks on 2, like dinosaurs, birds. Even sometimes snakes show up, and they have no legs, so they just slither. Other important lingo you might hear if you jump into the furry fandom are things like beans, which is referring to the paw pads on your hands or your feet. Maws or jaws, which is basically just another word for your mouth, and if it's moving or not. Another thing would be hand paws and feet paws, which is just describing your part of the fursuit, which is your hands and your feet. Alright, now that you know all the basic anatomy lingo when it comes to the furry fandom, let's move on and talk about what a fursona is, or like what I like to personally call it, you vomit. Now, why I call it you vomit is basically because it's exactly that. A fursona is the personification of someone's inner feelings or human parts. They take a certain trait that they love and or want to be and put it in an animalistic kind of character. The furry fandom is very welcoming and pretty much will accept anything you create, so there's no judgment when it comes to your fursona and the characters you create. This in turn allows people freedom of expression and pretty much freedom of speech. People create things that are truly deep within themselves and express themselves through ways that they never thought were possible. For many, a fursona is a life and truly something they can't help but have because they feel so closed off and unloved in their real life, and being a furry or having that sona really lets them feel loved and cherished as a person or even as a furry. To me, this is the most accurate definition and purpose of a fursona that I can ever come up with. Alright, you know the body types, and you know what a you vomit / Fursona is. Let's move on to the more art aspects of the fandom, which pretty much most people are here for, the adoptables and making your own species. Adoptables are creatures that people create, whether they make them from scratch or from bases, that people can buy and resell. Basically, just based off of what they look like, you can make them a whole new character, backstory, and everything. And these are most commonly bought by people who don't have much artistic ability or just don't want to draw anything. Another thing you can do, if you're more artistically inclined, is make your own species. This is less common in the fandom. Well, for the most part, it's not so successful all the time. There's very few species that have been picked up by the fandom and truly loved. Popular examples of original species that most people will run into are angel dragons, pancans, protogens, primogens, circles, and wicker beasts. Know that there's many more, like many more, but those are just pretty much the few I can name off the top of my head. What makes an original species differ from a hybrid, which is taking two animals and mixing them together, is the fact that they have a distinct lore and look to them. Each original species has a set of rules that you need to follow if you wish to be a part of it. And some species, like protogens, are closed, meaning you can't just pick them up and start being one of them. The artist themselves has to give you permission to join that part of the species. There are also semi-open species, like my species. They're only semi-open because certain aspects of each species has different things. For my example is my species has a set of ages. The reason why mine is only semi-open is because elders, like myself, which are defined by their bones showing through their skin and being unable to fly, but also being one of the fastest part of their species, can't be owned by anybody other than people I respect and love, and myself. Though other ages of my species, like toddler, kid, teenager, and adult, are open, and you can join them anytime, provided that you follow each age's rules. The things that help define a certain species are the characteristics that they share that help separate them from the rest of it. For my species, if we're not talking about elders, the best way you could define them from any other bird-type creature you could find are their ears, the spikes on their back, their two long tails, color pattern, and fact that they're all parrots. Each of these aspects combined create my species, and they all play an important role in making of the species and the lore behind them. Just as an example, the two long feathers behind me on my tail, they are basically my lifeline. If you pull out one of them, I'm gonna bleed to death. But I also have my defense, which is these red spikes on the head and my back. They are full of poison, and I can shoot them out if I need be. So as you can see, the furry fandom can be confusing at first, but it's totally worth it, and it's full of creativity and acceptance. So if you're ever on the fence about joining the furries despite everything we get, join it. Trust me, you will not regret it. We're happy to have you. Okay, I hogged the video enough. Back to you, Korean Sketches.
Thank you again to Crayons and Circuses. She was so kind and helped me a lot towards the end of the week. Please follow her on Instagram, YouTube, and all her other socials in the description. Her artwork is wonderful. That being said, let me tell you about my experience. The first day was my research day. I looked through references on Google and Pinterest, and then I looked into art styles of different animals. The next day I made an Amino account and started to look for Fursonas to draw. I also interviewed any community members that were willing to speak to me. I should mention that I stayed on the safe for work side of the fandom, and depending on who you are, you'll have other experiences. Everyone I spoke to was very kind and polite and willing to answer my questions. I managed to get quite a lot of submissions from people who wanted me to draw their Fursonas. I learned a lot of new vocabulary and that people even make up species instead of just sticking with animals. What you're watching on screen now is a few speed paints of the Fursonas I was able to draw. All of them were drawn for free because I wanted this to be a big learning experience for me. It was all experimental, but also really fun. To me, furry anatomy is a basic human form with a little bit of extra hurdles to jump in between by adding fur and snouts and feathers and other parts of the body that need to be manipulated for certain animals. I'm leaving all of their socials in the description and also flashing them on screen while their characters are on there. Throughout the week, I tried different poses and adding more or less details, and when it was time to make my own, I ended up choosing a raccoon named Skip. I used some of my traits, such as my outgoingness and my short height. I didn't want a more feral Fursona, mainly because I enjoy a human figure more than the animal ones. I think it's more fun to experiment throughout the week, and I got to meet the most kind people. Overall, I think this community was a good one with a bad street credit due to its not so safe for work side. If you're under the age of 15, I would say take caution on what sites you use in case you come across some inappropriate content, but also enjoy your time in the fandom. It was very welcoming, and I was complimented on my art, even though I was a beginner. I really like the fandom, and though I doubt that I will come back to it again, I'm thankful for such a great experience. If you're new to my content, please subscribe and turn on the bell. I don't post too often, so I promise you won't be spammed with notifications from me. Leave a comment on other art fandoms you'd like for me to try. I'm looking for I'm looking for fandoms with a lot of fan inserts or original characters like the furry community. I've been looking for new ones to do and to see what other creators I can collaborate with that are more knowledgeable than me. Thank you all for watching, and once again, please check out Crayons and Castles. She is a great artist who loves what she does. Thank you again, and have a great day.